Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody is well. Welcome to Startup Week and a defense track. I got to tell you, I've been looking forward to this panel for a long time. How many here think the height of sort of the goal for every startup should be venture capital? How many people think you got to get venture capital to kind of grow your business? Well, that's good. I see no hands. For those of you in the audience, I see no hands because we are in Dayton, Ohio, and we are smart people. It's not, right? One way to fund your business is certainly through venture capital. There is a time and a place for venture capital. But these three entrepreneurs really prove there are other ways to build really impressive, really incredible businesses, especially in the technology space. So how many here would go to the government for help to start your startup? Outside of programs like, grants and that kind of thing, who would actually go to start a technology company or grow a technology company in partnership with the government? This is where you raise your hands. This is where you say yes. This is what. So this panel is really about that. It's about three real great entrepreneurial stories about people who understand how the government, and specifically research organizations like Air Force Research Labs and others, I know this team has experience with other labs as well. These government labs can be really important as you perfect your message, as you build your product, as you build your company. Now, is it easy? It's not, of course. There are some challenges when you try to engage with the government, a government entity, to try to build a company. But you're going to hear some really incredible stories. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by having each of them introduce themselves, give you a little bit about their company. They're going to dive into when they engaged the government. I think that's an important question. When do you engage the government? I want each of these folks to tell us kind of when they decided that the government path was the right way to go. We're going to talk about why they engaged. It's not self-evident. If you could go get bank financing or venture financing or angel financing or participate in a research lab, why do you choose to participate in a research lab? We're going to talk about how they engaged. And then we're going to talk about kind of the tips and tricks that they might have. All right? So it'll be a really great panel. I appreciate the panelists in joining us. I appreciate you joining for this discussion. So I'm going to start to my immediate left. We'll start with Jason. We'll just ask each of you to introduce yourself briefly, a little background on yourself, background on the company, and then we'll dive in.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Jason Molnar here. Actually, I didn't even know there was a panel. I'm just here for the cocktail hour and drinks afterward, maybe.
I didn't know I was moderating, so we're even.
So what did I do before this? So I spent many years in the United States Army as a reconnaissance officer. I'm not used to a microphone. I'm used to shouting at people over large distances, so this is a bit odd for me to hold a microphone. So bear with me if I shout randomly during this presentation at all. And after reconnaissance, I parlayed that experience into intelligence and started working at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. Started working a little bit on the foreign materials side and ended up meeting my CEO currently, Dr. Ken Edge. We worked together in a previous life and parlayed that experience in business development I learned under him and really grew that into what Infinity Labs is today. And so what do I do for the company? I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Infinity Labs, and as my fellow entrepreneurs will be able to tell you, you wear many hats. I think I was describing my job a little bit earlier, and I came up with 8 different things I do. I don't do the most, I do a lot, but guess what, so do my partners. So on the strategy side, I handle business development, marketing, advertising, relationship management, any official delegations, whether it's congressional, state, and I really try to build those teams, especially as an entrepreneur. We'll all testify, you can't do this unless you're a part of a team in a lot of these opportunities. If you go at it alone, it's a hard mountain to climb, but you have someone else to help carry that backpack, that really helps along the way. I'm pleased to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks to the Tech Startup organizers for providing me an opportunity to share some of my experiences with all of you. So I'm Sivaram Gogneni, President of Spectral Energies. Our company is located in Beaver Creek, and we have been doing research and development with the Air Force Research Lab for the past 25 years, and we also work with other government agencies like NASA, Department of Energy, National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, and a lot of government organizations. Some of the technologies we are working on: hypersonics, direct energy, artificial intelligence, laser diagnostics and sensors. So broad range of technologies. So we have won more than 150 SBR, STTR topics over the past 15 years, and before that we won another 100. And these are all from various organizations, as I mentioned. And we also have a commercial product, so we build a laser which is useful for hypersonics under direct energy. So we have about 30 to 35 employees with 20 PhDs, and we are very proud to make contributions to the Department of Defense along with other government agencies.
Hello everyone. Thank you also to the Offtheshelf Center as well as the Startup Week for putting together this panel actually, because I think it's really very important. My name is Atusa Alavi. I am co-founder and CEO of eMobilize, which is a small startup, a new startup out of Kent, Ohio. And I wear two hats before that, and still a little bit. I am chief counsel of another technology company called Alpha Micron, also located in Kent, which itself started some 22 years ago with an SBIR from the Air Force, and has been engaged over the years with a lot of different DoD agencies, Navy, Army, Air Force, as well as NSF and NASA and so on. So a little bit of experience on both sides, first as an established company when I came in, and what it looks like when you start your own startup, which is what eMobilize is. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Now you see why I'm excited about this panel. We are really good in the Dayton region at utilizing government funding. It's, I would argue, one of the things that we as a community have a particular strength in, and these are great examples of that. So I'm going to stick with you, too. So we're going to start the questioning. As I said, I'd love to understand from each of you kind of when you decided to engage. It's not always self-evident. You don't want to necessarily start with a government relationship, although they may disagree. I'd love to hear that. But kind of when did you decide that the government was a meaningful path, a government relationship or a government funding vehicle was the right kind of path to build your business and begin to improve and develop your technology?
Right, so eMobilize is a spin-off of Alpha Micron, so we were a little bit biased since Alpha Micron started with a SBIR or an SBIR. Literally, the Air Force went to Kent State University 22 years ago and said, we have a problem, can you help and solve it? And so 3 professors said, yes, we can, and they formed a company, which is now Alpha Micron. So because we'd seen that being a successful engagement, when I started eMobilize, it was like, hey, I'd like to do this, but I actually started. The start was once you actually have an idea, you've tinkered, you've filed a patent application, and you've made a rough prototype, and it looks like, oh yeah, that's going to work. So to go after funding is like I have 2 choices. There's the private, funding route, and there is the government route, and decided to engage both at the same time. So that's when we started. It was pretty much at the beginning.
Yeah, for me, I'm a scientist and engineer. I have a PhD in mechanical engineering, and I came to Dayton as a National Research Council postdoctoral fellow after my PhD. So as engineers and scientists, we always trying to solve the problems, technical problems and all. So we see a lot of opportunities in the government organizations. As I mentioned, you take any government organization, there are a lot of technical problems to be solved. So we thought that we are very good at providing appropriate solutions, sometimes directly by us from our own ideas. Sometimes we collaborate with academic partners who are excellent in doing research. So with the collaborations with the academicians and some other industry, both large scale and other industries. So we thought that we could provide an excellent R&D services to the government. So that's how our company was started, and we are fortunate to work with several organizations.
Well, you're going to notice a trend. Our story is similar. So the 7 of us that started this company had a lot of defense experience. Then corporately, we're at about 125 years as we started. One of my co-workers had worked for AFRL. Another one had led a technology office at the Air Force Research Lab. I had worked with the National Ground Intelligence Center, the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, another with the NSA. So we all had an understanding of these government organizations. And so as we formed our business, day one, we talked about things not being easy. Within the first week, I'd made 160 phone calls, right? So that's part of the entrepreneurial journey you're gonna hear throughout this. Did all of those phone calls result in work? No. In fact, many of them did not. But a lot of those phone calls established a base with the government. They said, hey, we're open to talk. Let's talk about what we can do and what we can provide. And that's really what started as the catalyst for our growth. Is we're performing that work really to push the envelope on the research and development, the internal research and development side, and to build that commercial product. So for us, we started a business and we knew engaging the government was the right springboard for us to start.
So that's why we. Am I off? Oh. So that's why I started with the question of when. Because I wanted to give you a sense that each of these companies knew that they were solving problems of interest to the government, right? So now I want to get to the why. Because pretend for a moment that you didn't know that you could solve a government problem. Why, in that circumstance, would you engage with the government? What advantages are there to engaging with the government to do this kind of fundamental research or the fundamental work versus, as you said, going out and getting capital from a private market? So why would you engage with the government in the first place? And I'll start actually, Dr. Ganini, with you, because you heard him say that he has a couple hundred SBIR awards, right? And so he understands when to engage with the government, how to engage with the government. But I know him well enough to know he also is engaged with other entities, other funding entities. So I'm particularly interested to hear kind of why the government. Is this the place to get your money? Is it one of the places? Why would you do it in the first place?
Thank you, Scott. It's very easy. The government gives you an opportunity. You don't need to pay back. Whatever the money they give you is free. And as long as you provide a solution to the problem they are interested, the money is free. You don't have to give equity. They don't ask you for any equity in the money they give you. If you go to them outside venture capitalists or angel investors or anybody, you're always obligated to give up something. In the government, you don't have to give. The most importantly, the technology. The technology belongs to you. So they don't claim even on the technology. What they do it is, if you develop the technology, they have the right to first to use the technology. Not for free, they will still pay for the technology. So you don't have to pay back, and you own the technology which will have potential to commercialize it. In our case, for example, when we developed a laser product using the phase 1, phase 2 SBIR, we were able to make a product and then sold to government, industry, and other organizations, generate about $20 million. I don't think we would have accomplished by doing this, going to the venture capitalists without giving back anything. So you have technology advantage and you have free money. As long as you understand the process, I think that's the best way to go. It's a free venture capital.
I do. There's a couple more points that I'd like to add. I think if you're interested in basic science research, there are not a lot of venture funds or anything like that that is that interested in that. And I think between just the names that you mentioned, National Science Foundation, the DOD even, or NASA, they really are interested in the basic science side of things. So they are willing to engage earlier than venture capital. The other thing I would add is, other than equity development money, it's also control. You have somebody looking over your shoulder the entire time, telling you what to do, and the government does not do that. I mean, it does come with some disadvantages, and we can go into that, but a major advantage is they basically leave you alone to go and do what you think you need to do to solve the problem.
That's a good point. Having an opportunity to do the fundamental research, especially for the scientists and engineers, is an excellent opportunity. It's a good point.
Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think you need me for this, my goodness. There's a little bit to add here. The advantages with working with the government from the onset have been made pretty clear. Here's some of the things that I really like about the process. You have multiple organizations within the government, and their sole mission is to get entrepreneurs into the defense sector, right? We talked about free money. There's also opportunities for colliders or engagement like this. There's direct interaction with technical points of contact, with program executive offices. They give you every opportunity to talk about your technology, your solution, your research, and then they will help you. These organizations will actually pair you up and marry you with opportunities throughout the federal government. I don't see that in the venture capital world very often, right? We talked about equity. I am not anxious to give 50, 60, 70% of anything I've created away from the start. And so if you are autonomous, if you are really self-sustaining and you really want to go at this on your own, the SBIR route is great. It's a choose your own adventure with the SBIR. Depending on your technology, you can work with NASA. Depending on your solution, you may have applications with the Department of Energy. So the government really likes these opportunities that give them the opportunity for dual-use technology. And the SBIR program is an excellent way to really market that technology, own it, and then frankly, to make some money on it as well. And the government is proud and very easily will tell you, this is a goal and objective of the program.
It's a good point. Another thing I would like to add is, both Bruce and Jason mentioned, the workforce development is another thing the government would like to encourage. So for example, if you take the hypersonics area, the government recognizes that we are short compared to the competition going on with the China, Russia, and other countries, right? Now the government gave $100 million to the academic institutions and the small businesses to develop the workforce, which is the future generation who are going to be specialized in this. You don't get that kind of stuff in the private industry. It used to be like Bell Labs and a lot of other big industries. They used to have their own research labs, but they're not as prominent as they were 30, 40 years ago. So right now, the only source is the government.
Great. So you heard the three entrepreneurs really talk about basic scientific research, taking solutions to the government. I want to ask each of them to comment, if you'd like, on, do you ever take problems to the government? Do you ever bring the government a problem which you think they would care about and maybe a solution? In other words, do you ever propose things to the government that they haven't asked for? And this is a loaded question because the Air Force is doing this very extensively right now with open topics. So Jason talked about these dollars and these programs in the SBIR program, Small Business Innovative Research Program with the Air Force right now. The Air Force is specifically calling for open topics. There's not a topic that they're looking for an answer to. They're asking you to propose things. So I'm kind of giving away the answer to the question, but I'd love the experience of these three entrepreneurs. Have you ever pitched something to the government that they didn't ask you to develop?
Absolutely.
What's that experience been like?
So of course we proposed under the open topic, and we were selected. So, you know, I should add, I'm an attorney, so I've done a lot of deals back and forth on the contracting side, but I never actually written a grant. So I had to start from scratch, and with the help of Parallax, of course, we would never have gotten the grant, but we did, and we put it together, and once you get that grant, then the doors open. So, but they put the onus on you. All they're saying, all that grant says is that, yeah, this could be potentially interesting, but you now need to go and see who within the Air Force, for example, has this, what needs your solution. And then it's back onto what Jason does, hundreds of phone calls to figure out who it is, and you talk, and some people say, yeah, that's relevant to me, and then some of them say, no, it's not. Go find somewhere else. It's fair game. But at least gives you that opportunity to do it.
Yeah, so it goes both ways. The government, the responsibility to come up with problems which is relevant to their organization. If you take Department of Defense, they want any problem to be solved, any technology to be developed which can help the war fighters, either human resources warfighters or the fighters itself, right? If you take the National Institute of Health, anyone come up with ideas on the cancer prevention or any sensors, biomarkers type of sensors is very useful. So when you look at all these organizations, many times 90-95% of the time they think of very good problems. And they spend a lot of time to come up with those problems and describing the problem statement. But we, working with the different organizations, we also have ideas by discussing with, let's say, if you take a medical field, I was discussing with one of my mates who is a neurosurgeon. So I was watching the almost 4 hours of neurosurgery, and she was explaining to me that during the surgery, she can measure the pressure inside the brain. It's called intracranial pressure. But after the surgery or before the surgery, to measure the pressure, there is no sensor available. She said that, oh, if you get an idea of the sensor, that would be great. So then we proposed it to human performance wing in the AFRL, and also we submitted a proposal to National Institute of Health as a, there is a problem to be solved. So that is one example. Similarly, in the Department of Defense, in the additive manufacturing or inertial navigation type of things, we came up with innovative ideas which they have not thought about. And when we discuss with the large corporations like Northrop Grumman, Raytheon and all, they share some of the information with us and say, government has not thought about it, but it's going to be a disruptive technology. You as a small business can make an impact. They don't give money to us, but you initiate as a small business SBIR topic, and then we will help you during the process. So we submitted to Missile Defense Agency, they loved it, and they are considering funding to that. So there are several examples, it goes both ways.
Yeah, I'll just add just a very little bit. So we love the open topic. It really allows the brains within your organization, the mad scientists, right, the wizard software developers, to really go at solutions differently, right? Yes, you follow a template on how you submit that, but if you've got a wild idea and you know an organization that is open to it, I'll say DARPA, for instance, if you have that idea, there are organizations that will listen to you. National Science Foundation is another. So I would challenge you, if you ever do look at SBIRs or STTRs, just understand that those open topics, you're kind of a technical artist, right? What is your medium you're going to paint with? It's on that small proposal to the government. They're going to allow you the opportunity to prove your technical solution. I think that's imperative. And I also, one other thing, whether it's an open topic or a white paper to an organization, that is also an option. If you are not in a current round of SBIR sitters, and those are already being up for source selection, but you've got a great idea and you know in an organization that can use it, if finding a point of contact either through those small business offices and getting a white paper in the government's hands, the government is very apt for those solutions. They want people who want to solve the problems. And so if you identify them, whether it's within a SBIR sitter or a white paper, you're already a step ahead of your competitors who are just signing their names to BAAs or IDIQs and saying, we'd like to bid on this. Throwing those ideas out to the government is imperative, and that's why there's multiple means of do so.
The other thing is, the source of this information is also should not be limited to the United States. There's a lot of exciting technology goes on around the world. So if you are aware of any technology developed in Europe, Asia and all, and then if you think that it's going to make a significant impact in the United States and the government is not paying attention to that, we take the responsibility and say that, hey, there is I think you need to develop this technology. So that they listen to us and they find a way to create a vehicle to fund the researchers and engineers. So your source of information should not be limited to just within the country. You can open up the rest of the world and bring it to the appropriate people in this country, and they are very receptive to that. And we have a few examples on that.
So I want to come back to Jason really quickly because he said something really important that sometimes gets lost a little bit. When we talk about SBIR and STTR, so you think about fundamental research kind of on your own as a company, fundamental research that you're doing in partnership with the university, that STTR program. Jason mentioned that you're a bit of an artist, right? You're creating a sense of what is possible, and you're painting on sort of the canvas of this interaction with the government. But increasingly the customer for that product matters earlier. And so I'd love your sense, Jason, of how you as a company think about finding that customer that is going to drive the acquisition, drive the buying decision. You're probably not talking to them when you start the research, but you've got to have a sense of where they are. So how do you think about that, finding that customer? When do you really start looking for that end customer?
That's a great question. I could probably talk an hour on that alone. Because part of my job as a strategy officer is to look at what documents some of these major problems are being presented in. So the National Security Strategy, the National Defense Authorization Act, looking at those different line items within there and seeing where the government is focusing. 4 years ago, cybersecurity was 3 line items. In 20 and 21, it's 50, 60 line items, okay? So you can see where the country is going within those open and public documents. And I would challenge you, if you ever want to get into this business, start there. Start looking at where the dollars are going. If you have a niche within those items, go for it. Exploit that gap, because at the end of that gap, there's a commercialization, there's a product, and there's money for you. When do you start that process? Boy, that goes back to those 160 phone calls, right? Because those 160 phone calls lead to 50 emails per person. If you're tracking these within a customer relationship management software suite, you're looking at 2 or 3 pages of notes on different contacts you've had. And I'm not the only one within our company that walks the pavement and shakes hands and tries to find these solutions. But having a conversation early and often is very important. Having the secondary conversations to really discuss the technical merit, either behind a non-disclosure agreement or one of the other documents, proprietary information agreement, to really talk solutions is imperative. And so I will tell you, for every 1 phone call or 1 email I have, there's 5 or 6 that happen afterward that are even more important. And a lot of those times, it's not with the point. If I'm talking to Scott here and I say, hey, I want to sell you this technology, I've got an idea, he may recommend me to a friend of his, and I may talk to that friend, and that friend says, hey, I've actually got another company I work with who's working on something similar, but you complement it. You'd be amazed at how many of those conversations leads to financial transactions, dollars, partnerships to work on these opportunities. So as you make these decisions in your life, or if you choose the defense route, never turn down a conversation. You have no idea where it's going to go. And so I would say having those conversations early and often, frequently, taking copious notes, and then following up, whether it's a prospect review or a bid and pipeline review, to understand where you're going. I know I'm getting into the operations side, but you got to think like that if you want to convert those leads into dollars.
Yeah, excellent point. Especially the National Defense Authorization Act. So the source of information, again, as Jason pointed out, National Defense Authorization Act, and if you just focus on the Air Force, they just finished the Air Force 2030 study. So they went all around the Air Force organizations and say, what would be our priorities in the next 10, 20, 30 years? And they interact with academicians. They went around the country, they had panels, and they took all the feedback and created this document. So if you look at that document, you know what the priorities are. So they say 5 topics, for example, microelectronics, hypersonics, direct energy, artificial intelligence. Those are the kind of priorities. So you have to understand where the Air Force is going. And then you also, when you attend the professional societies, like I'm active in the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, whenever we organize a conference, we invite directors and the top managers. And they will come and tell what is their roadmap within their organizations, next 5, 10, 15 years. So you understand where they are going. So then even people like Elon Musk, I remember 20 years ago, he came to one of these conferences in 2002, 2005 time period. He talked about this SpaceX, whatever he's doing, he talked 20 years ago. So you gather all this information, both commercially and the government, where they are going, what their priorities are, and align yourself within your knowledge. Or if you don't, you can also interact with academicians and gather that knowledge and try to come up with a strategy. You need at least 2 to 3 years time before you get any government contracts. Recently, the acquisition strategy, which the Department of Defense realized that it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, they set it up during the Cold War. Now they are trying to change the whole acquisition process. So some of the contracts right now, it may take only, for me, 2019, the 3-star general was there. They made the decision in 5 minutes. He stood there and he said, until I get my first $100,000 within 2 minutes, transferred to my bank, he did not leave. So they are very aggressively trying to change the acquisition process. But to get the opportunity to understand the priorities, it takes 1 to 2 years time before you see the dollars in the bank.
Matus, I'd love for you to comment on when you kind of identified the customer, because you're kind of in the throes of it right now. You're an open topic. And so when did you realize, I think you have, I know you have, when did you realize that you got to find a customer because you can't just keep doing research and development?
When everybody told me on the AFWorks and Air Force, you need to find a customer. That is the whole point of this phase 1. And it actually seemed like they're taking a leaf out of the book of how venture capital does, which is customer discovery, product market fit, and all of that is very front and center on that process. And it seemed to me that, at least in the Air Force, that's what the Air Force open topic model is. But I do want to, so I can come back and answer that, but I do want to also open up that it's not just the Air Force that's doing that. For example, SoftWorks, which deals with Special Operations Forces, they have an open portal where you can just submit a white paper, and then if they like it, they'll give you an opportunity to present. It's called Technology Tuesday or Tech Tuesday, Transformational Technology. So we submitted through one of those, and they said, oh yeah, you get a slot. And then they gave us a slot, and when I presented, it was virtually, of course, but it was a lot of people attending from a lot of different factions, not just even SOCOM, but across. We got connected to people in the Department of Homeland Security, in the Coast Guard, and the Navy. I mean, it was really very, very wonderful to get those connections. So, and there are a lot of other. Once you get into it, you just learn, like I learned from scratch. That across the board, they are figuring out ways to directly reach out, or ask the companies to directly reach out to various faction, Army, Navy, everybody. Say what you can do, and we will take, keep a repository of all these solutions, and then as and if necessary, we'll come back to you.
So, want to raise a real quick point. You're so right, Atusa. So there are 11 agencies in the federal government that issue SBIR contracts, Small Business Innovative Research Contracts. Across the government enterprise, there's about $4 billion that gets spent in this primary scientific research. So we love the Air Force. We're here in Dayton, Ohio. These companies all have experience with the Air Force. But there are all kinds of other organizations that offer this kind of fundamental scientific research. They engage slightly differently. We like to think that the Air Force is very progressive in the way they think, and they're kind of leading the kind of government in a lot of ways in thinking about open topics, getting ideas from these wonderful companies, and then engaging with those companies to find fits within the government. Really important point though, and I appreciate the panelists talking about it, you kind of have to understand that customer. And so to Sivram's point, he took 2 years before he understood the government enough to kind of find where that customer was. The open topic lets you get a little bit ahead of that, in that they'll begin to dialogue with you. It's still your job as a small business to go find the customer who's ultimately going to care. So it's a great vehicle, but each one of these companies had to make a decision about how they were going to use their scarce resource. So we haven't talked about the kind of money, I hate to be so crass about it, but what kind of money can you get when you engage with the government? And it varies, it's changed year over year. So without disclosing anything you shouldn't disclose, kind of what do you generally get in terms of dollars when you engage with the government? Can I get $1 million? Can I get $10 million? Can I get $25,000? And again, it varies, but I'd love each of your perspectives on, at some point you decided it was worth the $50,000, it was worth $1 million. What's your experience in terms of how that money really funded your operations? Was it a little bit of money, a lot of money? So I'll start with you because I know the open topic pretty well.
Well, the open topic starts with a 3-month duration, $50,000, which we did an STTR, so our share was 30. It doesn't go a long way, but it opens the doors. So typically, with NSF and so on, a phase 1 is about $225K, and a phase 2 is $750 to $1.5 million. So certainly what you would, within the realm of angel seed kind of stage money, that is what the government can provide from 200 to $1 million, $1.5 million in the first 2 years of it. Once you get engagement, is across the board more or less.
Jason, was that your experience as well?
Yeah, I will say just for the wider audience, we've been talking a lot about SBIRs, and I don't think we've necessarily defined the stages, right? Phase 1 feasibility study. Oh, I beat you to it? Okay.
That's good, go ahead.
All right, well, I'll just roll with it. All right, so you got your feasibility study in phase one, you got your commercialization plan, and potentially minimum viable product in phase two, and then phase three, this is the goal for every entrepreneur. It's your hunting license. It is the commercialization of your product. The ceilings are much larger. I've seen ceilings $500–600 million. That doesn't mean the government gives you that money. You have to go out and find customers with that money, and really you use your tech to satisfy those dual use requirements, right? So that's just one thing, one food for thought. For us, one of the things that we like to pursue are direct to phase twos. If you already understand the feasibility of a product, or you have a plan that you know can be commercial, you have potentially even a minimum viable product, whether you're doing that through internal research and development, or you've just got enough bright people that they can put words on paper and they can outline that commercialization plan well, you can pitch to customers direct to phase twos, right? We talked about up to $1.5 million. I think that's a good baseline. And every once in a while, you get customers who are willing to talk about a direct to phase three. If you've got a product that's ready to go, if you have a solution that can benefit them or other partner organizations, there are government customers that will talk to you directly about phase three and how you get those products into government hands.
Thank you. That was the next line of questioning, because we talked about these opportunities and kind of how do you step through this. So just to reinforce the point, the Air Force specifically, you can get $50,000 to the open topics to do a 3-month project. It goes up from there. Phase two is generally $750,000 to about $1.5 million, something like that.
$750 to $1.5 million.
Yeah, $750,000 to $1.5 million. And then as Jason says, the phase three, which by the way, phase three engagements, as Jason said, are contracts. They're not research and development anymore. It's contracts, can be anything. And so you get a sense of, once you find that customer, once you engage, there is a process that each of these companies can go through. So when they're making a decision about where they're going to spend their scarce resource and their scarce time, you get a sense of why working with the government can be a meaningful way to fund an early stage company. Because $1.5 million, for example, in a phase two didn't come out of the VC's pocket. Jason didn't give up 30% of his company. Atusa didn't give up 30% of her company to engage with the Air Force or to engage with a DoD customer. So the limited time we have left, let's talk a little bit about your best practices. What, if you had to give 1 or 2 pieces of advice to somebody sitting in the audience who's just thinking about engaging with the government, what would be that 1 or 2 pieces of advice? Dr. Greenlee, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, again, understanding the priorities is very important, and do the due diligence, and get actively involved in volunteering professional societies to get those kind of information. So doing the due diligence early on would be my advice. And also, you also need to understand working with the government is not easy. You need to have a lot of patience. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. Though they are trying to change the acquisition process, as I mentioned, from Cold War to now, still there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hurdles there. And when Tusa was pointing out that on phase one, identifying the customer, the upper management at the generals level, they want to change the process dynamically. But when it comes to the lower and mid-level managers and all, there's a lot of communication gap. So we bring those kind of gaps to the upper management. So doing the due diligence and understanding, navigating the process within the government are the most important things from my point of view.
So now would be a good time to answer your earlier question about where did we know when we had to engage with the customer. Actually, I did an I-Core program, and that's run by the National Science Foundation, and it is a program to kind of engage with scientists, especially in university settings, to show them what that process of customer discovery looks like. And I highly, highly recommend that if you can get into an I-Core program, it will be transformational and eye-opening in terms of how the process is done. So that would be one. And secondly, patience, and know that the government is not the be-all and all of, it's not the answer to all your questions. There will be delays, there will be dry patches, There will be, you put in a lot of effort into your SBIR and then you sit and wait and then you don't get it. And then it's like, now what? It's an all or nothing process. So don't completely rely on that, and make sure you have some, other plan Bs and plan C and a plan D perhaps to be able to navigate those dry periods.
ICON program open to everyone or only to the people who have won the phase ones? I think it's not open to anyone.
The one that I did was open before you get the phase one. But I think across the board, it was really for a lot of, students, PhD students, and the faculty and so on to figure out how that works.
Yeah, there's been some great conversation over here. My original point was I was going to say do your market research, due diligence, right? But I'll focus on the human side, the human dynamics, all right? Because you're getting a lot of really good technical understanding. And I'm really impressed with the other panelists here because we're all talking about different things to move your businesses or ideas forward. So the human dynamic side, always be selling, all right? I know that sounds a bit cheesy. I know that may be out of your comfort zone. If you've got an idea, if you've got a proposal, you need your elevator pitch. You need 30 seconds to sell it because you never know when you're going to get an audience with a general officer. You never know when you're going to run to the chief scientist of NASIC. You have no idea. You need to be able to say that. You need to be able to make an impact, hitting their pain points, and then walking away. Now, I will tell you, be authentic. Government customers get sold to a lot, right? I think some of the reason we've been successful early on, if we are not the best fit, they were not the best fit. We tell them early and often, or we say, hey, we think this can work later. We mature this. You guys get some federal dollars in the next year, and then we'll come back. If you are authentic with someone, they'll remember that, and I think that's something that's very impactful. They're sold to all the time. So when you have those opportunities to discuss things, if you're a great fit, if you have a minimum viable product that satisfies their needs, let's talk about it, pitch it. If you're not, recommend somebody else. Because we've even received work having recommended other companies saying, hey, they've got a better solution, but we can help on the advising side. And the government customer loves to hear that because they know you're being authentic with them.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. Authenticity is very important. You can fool them only once. They are very smart people. So honesty, integrity, authenticity, these are all virtues when you deal with the customer, in addition to the technology. Just technology alone is not enough. Thank you.
That's such great advice. So since I have a microphone, I get to use the schedule a little bit. And I would say, are there any questions from the audience? Any questions? You will rarely get a panel like this with this kind of experience, so take advantage. Any questions about engaging the government in helping your startup? Yeah, got a question over here.
Hi. Based on everything I've heard, it sounds like you're selling services, research services. Like you said, you have a lot of PhDs on your staff. So I don't know much about all this. So it sounds like in some ways maybe you're saying we can solve this problem for you, or engineers and PhDs can figure it out, or maybe you have a product. What advice would you give for a company that has an off-the-shelf product already? That you're not selling research, you're selling a product, and perhaps it's not that expensive to like the average commercial customer. How does that work with all of this?
Yeah, so that's a good point. That's the reason the Air Force came up with a new methodology called AppWorks. So you can propose whatever the commercial off-the-shelf technology, as long as you find, if you are looking for the Department of Defense contracts, and you have a product which is already commercialized or has a potential, then you make a connection to the Department of Defense and you submit that proposal. And if they like it, they will fund it to you. It doesn't have to be a R&D. They are looking for a product, ready-to-go solutions within 2 to 3 years and all. One source for you is Air Force also started called Challenges, Air Force Challenges. They pose the problems there. And if you have a commercial off-the-shelf technology, if it matches to that challenging problem, like a removal of the paint from the aircraft, it takes enormous amount of time, right? If you come up with a very, highly sophisticated laser technology or something which saves the time and the cost, they will love it. Anything you can help them save the cost and time, bringing the commercial off-the-shelf technology, they'll love it. That's exactly what they are looking for. They are not looking, on one hand they are looking for developing the technology R&D that's going on, but right now they are more interested in bringing the commercial off-the-shelf technologies. A lot of opportunities.
And you're really seeing the venture markets adjust to that as well, because it used to be the venture markets didn't want to touch companies that got government funding, because it tends to, government-funded companies tend to do research and development. And so they don't focus on true venture markets, they don't focus on markets, they don't focus on revenue. That has really changed for that reason, because if you can bring an off-the-shelf product or a product that you developed to the warfighter, it's going to be far faster than developing it from scratch. So the reason there's open topics, and the reason that the panel's talking about the research and finding the customer is because, yeah, one way to get to that customer is start with the basic research, go through phase 1, phase 2s into contract, but they're also open to, I have a solution. Jason said very early on, a dual-use solution. I have a dual-use solution. You can use it in the military. I already have it. Find your customer, and then they can using the acquisition process acquire it.
Yeah, I would like to add, since we are talking about the government, I mentioned about the government, but if you have a technology which can solve Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon type of thing, there is a small business supply chain within their organization. You go and register your name as a small business and say, I have this solution if you are interested. They are looking for solutions. You may believe it or not, not only the government, the industry is looking for solutions. The large organizations become so big and they are focusing on the high level, but at the lower level and mid level, if you solve the problem very quickly, there are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, those vendor portals really are a great way to get your name out there. Very easy to find on your Google machines, right? But getting your name into the vendor portals, so when they look up who makes these amazing widgets, and that's your company, they said who makes these, and they find your name in the vendor portal. It's a phone call, it's a contracting action, it's an other transactional authority later, and you're on contract or you've got direct funding to sell that product. So that is a way, and you can do it as a shotgun blast with these organizations as well.
So I want to thank the panel for what I think is a phenomenal session. One very quick commercial. So these companies are very experienced in the process. If you don't understand the SBIR process or the STTR process, you're fortunate there are really two organizations in town that every day think about this stuff. So Parallax Research Institute has an engagement with the Air Force. They've got some video content, they've got some content that demystifies some of this stuff. So be sure to, I love the Google machine, use your Google machine to go find that content. There's some really good information, video and otherwise streaming content around the SBIR program. And then as you get a little further, or you're kind of in that investigatory phase, be sure to reach out to the Entrepreneur Center. We run programs with the Air Force where we take small businesses who are going through their first SBIR award, a phase 1, and we prepare them for their phase 2s. And then when you get a phase 3, we prepare them for their later stages. So you're fortunate in this town to have a lot of expertise, not only panelists like this, but also organizations that can support you. So this is a viable way to fund your startup, to fund your early stage business. Don't forget about it. The siren song of venture capital and angel capital is really important to evolve a company. But as the panel said, when you start, there's other sources for some really important capital. So again, I want to thank the panel for an excellent session. Please join me in thanking the panel.